Your brain sends a signal right now, and it travels faster than a race car. But how does a tiny nerve cell actually do that? Stay to the end and you'll be able to picture every step of a nerve signal in your head. First, think of a nerve cell or neuron as a communication line. Its job? Take a message, move it along, and deliver it to the next cell. If one neuron fails, the message can be lost or changed. Let's zoom in on a single neuron. It has three main zones: dendrites that receive, a cell body that decides, and an axon that sends. Remember this: receive, decide, send. That's the whole story. Dendrites look like tiny tree branches. They're the antennae of the neuron. They collect chemical signals from many neighbors and turn them into small electrical changes inside the cell. Each incoming signal is like a whisper. Sometimes fire, some don't fire. The dendrites add up thousands of these whispers, all at the same time, every single moment. Now the cell body, also called the soma, acts like a tiny decision center. It constantly measures, are all these whispers strong enough together to send a real message down the axon? There's a special spot where the axon starts, the axon hillock. Think of it as the trigger zone. If the combined signal is big enough here, the neuron fires one clear all-or-none pulse. This pulse is called an action potential. It's not a gentle wave, it's a sharp yes signal. Either it happens or it doesn't, no half messages. That makes brain communication very reliable. Picture the axon as a long cable. In many neurons, it's wrapped with insulating segments called myelin. These insulating pieces help the signal travel faster and with less energy. Between the myelin segments are tiny gaps called nodes. The action potential doesn't crawl smoothly. It jumps from node to node, speeding along like a stone skipping across water. This jumping is called saltatory conduction. It's one reason you can pull your hand away from something hot almost instantly. Fast jumping signals mean faster reactions. Inside the axon, the action potential is made by charged particles, ions, moving across the axon's membrane. Small gates open and close, letting ions rush in and out in a precise pattern. As the pulse passes, tiny sodium gates open first, letting positive charge rush in. Then potassium gates open, letting positive charge exit. This flip in charge moves like a traveling wave. Right after firing, that segment resets. Gates close, charge returns to normal, and for a brief moment it cannot fire again. This prevents the signal from going backward. At the far end of the axon are small endings, terminal buttons. Here the electrical signal will be turned into a chemical signal to talk to the next cell in line. Between this axon ending and the next cell is a tiny gap called a synapse. The electrical pulse cannot jump that gap directly. It needs a clever trick, special messenger molecules. When the action potential reaches the end, it triggers vesicles inside the ending to fuse with the membrane and release neurotransmitters into the synaptic gap like colorful confetti. These neurotransmitters drift across the gap and bind to special receptors on the next neuron's dendrite. That binding opens new gates and starts fresh electrical changes there. Some neurotransmitters excite the next cell, pushing it toward firing. Others inhibit it, pulling it away from firing. The next neuron adds up all of these effects before deciding. So one simple signal in a neuron is really a chain. Chemical input on dendrites, electrical pulse along the axon, chemical output at the terminals, then back to electrical in the next cell. Remember our three-part rule. Dendrites receive, soma decides, axon sends. If you can picture that, you already understand the basic structure of a nerve cell better than most people. Here's a quick mental image. A neuron is like a tree with an electrical trunk. Leaves and branches receive signals. The trunk carries a quick pulse, and the roots pass it on to the next tree. Of course, real neurons come in many shapes and sizes, but they all follow this same logic: input, decision, output. That simple pattern builds the entire nervous system. Your brain alone has around 86 billion neurons, each making thousands of connections. Signals race through this network, forming thoughts, memories, and movements every second. When you learn something new, the way these neurons connect and signal can change. Connections strengthen or weaken, and patterns of firing shift. That's a big part of how memory works. Even a simple action like moving a finger, involves chains of neurons, some sensing, some planning, some sending commands to muscles, all using the same basic signal rules you've seen. So now when someone says neurons fire, you can picture it. Dendrites collecting whispers, the soma making a decision, and a sharp pulse racing down the axon to the next cell. Keep this image in mind, because in future videos we'll explore how groups of these cells create senses, emotions, and even consciousness, all from tiny signals racing through this network. If you enjoyed unlocking how a single nerve cell works, imagine what happens when billions work together. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into your amazing nervous system.